Welcome back, our viewers, our learners. Welcome to this episode of Economics Senior 5. My name is Namilo Sauda, your teacher, and today we shall be looking at price theory as our topic. So to start with, when we say price theory, many of us have heard about prices. Many of us have gone to the market. Many of us are very good at bargaining. We know how much a pen costs. We know how much a book costs. We know how much our favorite items cost. And to start with, when we say price theorem, we are simply looking at a concept that analyzes the relationship between price, how price influences the demand and supply. So basically, we shall be looking at prices, be looking at demand, be looking at supply, and how the three are related, how the three influence each other. So to start with, we have the definition of price theorem. Like I have said, price theorem is simply, it involves a concept, it is concerned with a concept that analyzes prices and how they influence demand and supply in a free market economy. So we have, this involves a concept concerned with how prices influence demand and supply in a free market economy. So we are simply looking at the analysis of prices and how they influence or affect the supply and demand in a free market economy. When we say a free market economy, we simply mean an economic system where there is no government intervention. It is only the forces of demand and supply that affect or influence prices. So a free market economy means that there is no government intervention. And then when I go to the term demands, we have demands. We simply say that demand is the desire, or the will. If the desire is more of a will, the desire backed by the financial ability to buy or to purchase a certain commodity. Or we can say that the demand is simply the amount of goods, and services that a buyer is able and willing to buy at a given price and in a given period of time. Simply the amount of goods and services that a buyer is able and willing to buy at a given price and in a given period of time. How much of the commodities are you able, or how much of the commodities can you afford to buy at a given price and in a given period of time? We also have another term which is supply. And supply is also the amount of goods and services. This time we are not talking about the buyer. In demand, it is the buyer that is buying. And then in supply, we are simply looking at the seller. And it is also the amount of goods and services the seller is also able and willing to put on markets at a given price and in a given period of time. So those are our three key terms. Number one, the price theory. The price theory is simply analyzing how prices affect or influence the demand and supply in a free market economy. Then with the demand, we are looking at how many goods, the amount of goods and services that a buyer is able and willing to buy at a given price and in a given period of time. Supply, we are looking at how many goods and services a seller is willing to put on market, willing to sell at that given price and in a given period of time. Under demand, we look at the buyer. Under supply, we look at the seller. Then, like I said, under price theory, we are looking at prices, demand, and supply. Then I have price. What is a price? Many of us have gone to the market and asked, how much do you sell this? What is the price of this piece of chalk? You're asking the seller, what is the price of this? But do we know what a price is? Price is simply the value of a commodity. We are looking at the worth or the value of a commodity in terms of money. Simply, the value, this is the value of a good or a service in terms of money. For example, we can say, e.g., the value of a pen. The value of a pen is 1,000. A bottle of soda is also 1,000. A bottle of soda is also 1,000. Of course, these are prices, and our currency is in shillings. A bottle of soda is 1,000 shillings. So price is simply the value of a commodity in terms of money. And to move on, when we know price, we're going to look at how prices are determined. How prices are determined, of course, in a free market economy. When you go to a market, what makes some of the items expensive and what makes some of the items very cheap? So how are prices determined? Who determines the prices? Is it the buyers? Is it the sellers? Is it the government? How are they determined? So number one, on the determination of prices, we can look at how prices are determined. We have a qualifier, of course, which is through. We can say prices are determined through. We have bargaining. Bargaining is also called haggling. Bargaining, which is also called haggling. In bargaining, we have people who are talented bargainers. You go to the market, they tell you a top dress is 5,000, but you want to bargain until you take that dress at 1,000. So with bargaining, we have two parties. We have the seller and the buyer. Under bargaining, we are looking at the seller setting his or her price. The seller sets a higher price, and of course, the buyer also tells or says how much he can afford. So we are looking at what we call negotiation of the two. So in bargaining, the seller and the buyer negotiate. They negotiate until when they reach at an agreement. The seller starts with a higher price, whereas the buyer also starts at a lower price but keeps on adding. So these two negotiate until when they reach at an agreement. Under bargaining or haggling, we have a seller and a buyer. The seller and the buyer negotiates about the price of the commodity to be sold, and then when they reach at an agreement, then the seller can give off the commodity to the buyer. So my key term in bargaining is simply the word negotiation. I want to look at the negotiation between the two, and when they reach at an agreement, then the seller can give the commodity to the buyer. And then my other way of determining prices, we can have through auctioning. We have through auctioning, and auctioning is also known as, under auctioning, many of us have been to churches. We have seen fundraising. We have seen fundraisings, for example, in schools. Whereby under auctioning we have also two people. We have the auctioneer and of course the buyers. In this case, in auctioning, the buyers are called bidders. So auctioning is also known as bidding. The buyers are called bidders. And of course, we have the seller and the buyers, like in the previous case, but in this case, the buyers are called bidders. Under auctioning, we have the starting price. And in this case, the highest bidder, or the person who says the highest amount, is the one who takes the commodity. The bidders compete. These people compete. They compete for the commodity, and the highest bidder takes the commodity. The highest bidder, of course, is the one who pays the highest amount of money. We can start, for example, if we are selling a textbook, we start at 20, and then these people normally do it in rounds. They say 21 times, 22 times, 23 times. If you don't agree with the price that this textbook is being sold, then you can add on that 20,000. So we are saying that the highest bidder, or the person who pays high for that commodity, will be the one to take it. We call it auctioning. Auctioning is also known as bidding. My other way of price determination, we have what we call forces of demand and supply. Of course, from the start, we said in a free market economy, it's an economy where there is no government intervention, and it's only the forces of demand and supply that influence the price of commodities. So it is also among the ways of price determination, the forces of demand and supply. What happens when we have very many buyers and one seller? If you're a seller selling, for example, tomatoes, and you're overwhelmed by very many customers, what will you do to your goods? Me as a seller, I will automatically increase the price because I have very many customers, meaning that the demand for my goods is very high. And of course, when we go to demand, when the demand is high, the price will automatically, when the demand is high, the price increases. And then when we go to supply, when we have very many goods on the market, excess of the goods, every seller will be willing to sell off his commodity very fast. And the only way to sell off the commodity is by reducing on the price for that commodity. So the forces of demand and supply also is one way of how prices are determined. Number one, when demand is high, because of the high demand, very many customers, then the prices will also be high. I have very many customers, so I automatically increase on the price of my goods. And when the supply is also high, when we have very many goods on the market, excess of the goods on the market, then my prices will be low. So the forces of demand and supply also determine how much prices of goods, how much the goods will be sold at. Then we have another way which is called fixing by treaty. Those of you who know a treaty is also known as an agreement. One way of determining prices is through or by fixing a treaty or fixing by treaty or an agreement. This is common. Of course, we have the seller and the buyer. These people sits and negotiates at which price this commodity has to be sold. This is common, for example, with the rentals and with the people who are selling land to the buyers. You want to buy land from someone, we call it, in quotes, we call it endagano. You make an agreement. I'm giving you 5 million for this piece of land, 50 by 50. We agree. He may start from, let's say, 7 million, but you negotiate until when you reach at an agreement. So prices can also be fixed through treaty or an agreement. So those are 4 ways how prices can be determined. We have other ways like price leadership. Price leadership, we are simply looking at the leading firm. Under price leadership, we have the leading firm. The leading firm sets the price at which a good or a service is to be sold. The leading firm sets a price at which a good or a service is to be sold, and of course other firms, other similar firms follow. Other similar firms follow that same price. Price leadership, we are looking at the well-established firms, the leading firms setting the price at which companies or firms that are producing the same product will sell their items. We call it price leadership. This is common, for example, with the soft drinks. For example, the soft drinks companies. We have, in Uganda, we have some of the leading firms like Coca-Cola and then Pepsi. They're the leading firms. And they sell sodas at 1,000. You realize that because these leading firms are selling at 1,000 for a soft drink, then it means if I am a new firm, an upcoming firm, an infant firm, then I have to also produce, if I'm producing also a soft drink, then I'll have to sell at the same price. Because these are already established. There's no way I will be able to compete with the already established firms. So they set the price at which other firms that are producing the same product will sell. If they sell, for example, a soft drink at 1,000, other similar firms will also be forced to sell at the same price. We call it price leadership. My other is called price legislation. Price legislation, or we can call it price control or price administration. How prices are determined? Through price legislation or price control or price administration. Here we are simply looking at the government coming in to set prices of commodities. We have a very great example of the agricultural products, like what happened, was it in 2018, when the prices of maize fell. The prices of maize were as low as 200 shillings per kilo. And because this was discouraging the farmers or the sellers, then the government had to come in and intervene, put a price control, and then it puts 500 shillings per kilo. Under price legislation, we are looking at government intervention in determining prices. And this is aimed at either protecting the consumers or protecting the producers. We have maximum price legislation, and we also have minimum price legislation. Maximum is, by the way, intended to protect the consumers. It is intended to protect the consumers. For example, if it is a matchbox, government can put a price control and they say you're not supposed to sell a matchbox above 100 shillings, meaning that they are protecting the consumers from exploitation. And then minimum price legislation is intended to protect the producers, whereby they are not supposed to sell their commodities below the price, the minimum price that is put. For example, the case for maize and agricultural products, the kilo had moved as low as 200 shillings. But then when government came and intervened, then they put the kilo at 500 shillings, meaning that if you're a buyer or if you're a seller, you're not supposed to sell below this price. It is intended to protect the producers. We call it price legislation, whereby we see government intervention in determining prices. We have another term which is called a cartel arrangement. A cartel arrangement. We are looking at producers or suppliers or sellers of the same product coming together. Sometimes it is called collusion. These sellers come together or collude. They come together and then fix a uniform price for their commodity. They come together and fix a uniform price for the commodity. Similar price. And of course, if for example there are few sellers, they intend to reduce competition among themselves. So they decide to meet and make an agreement. We have seen this, for example, when it is time for Christmas, and the buses are overwhelmed by the populations. The population numbers are very big, so the bus people can decide and say, let us take, for example, from Kampala to Mbarara, let the price be $50. They come together and agree on a price at which they have to sell or they have to transport their people. So this cartel is intended to agree on how much they have to sell their product. My other type could be, which is actually the last, we can call it resale price maintenance. Resale price maintenance. Here we are looking at firms or companies putting prices on commodities. They put prices on commodities, how much a commodity has to be sold. If it is an item, like we have live examples like newspapers. On newspapers, the price of a newspaper is labeled on top. Even if you go to any place or anywhere, you'll find that the newspaper is sold at, let's say, 1,000. The consumers will not be exploited, they will not be cheated, because the price of this newspaper is labeled on the item. So under the resale price maintenance, the companies simply they put a price at which the commodity has to be sold on the exact price. We have newspapers, we have also some sodas, some soft drinks sodas, where the price is labeled. So you can find more examples of the resale price maintenance, but we simply look at prices being labeled straight away from the companies, from the manufacturers, and then these same prices are the ones to be sold to the final consumers. So with the prices, simply said, it is the value of a good or a service in terms of money. We know various prices of various commodities and how they are determined. Number one, we looked at bargaining. Bargaining is more of haggling. We have the buyer and the seller. These people negotiate until when they reach at an agreement. We have auctioning. We say auctioning is also the same as bidding. We have the auctioners, the people who are actually selling, and then the bidders. These bidders compete for the item, and the highest bidder takes the commodity. Then we have the forces of demand and supply. We simply say, when the demand is high, automatically the price will also be high because the market is there. And we have, when supply is high, prices have to be low because the goods are in excess and they have to be sold off. To be sold off, then you have to lower the price. So they also determine how prices. Then we have fixing by treaty or agreement. The seller and buyer come, sit, agree on how much they have agreed to sell off the commodity. That is fixing by treaty or agreement. We have seen an example of rentals, an example of land, people who are selling off land. Then we have price leadership, where we say that the leading farm sets the price at which other farms have to sell the commodity. Price legislation, we are looking at the government setting the price at which commodities have to be sold. Cartel arrangements, the sellers of the same commodity come together, sit and agree on how much to sell their products. We have resale price maintenance. We are looking at manufacturers fixing the price of the commodity on the item to be sold. These items come when the prices are already labeled. So that's this same price is the price that is supposed to be sold to the final consumers. So that is how prices are determined. So we can have some other sample questions concerning what we have covered. Remember, we talked about price, we talked about demand, we talked about supply, we talked about how prices are determined. We have seen the various ways, and we have some sample questions. We have we can have define the term prices. We can have mention 3 ways how prices are determined. We can have explain the importance of prices in a free market economy. Then some other questions can be define demand or distinguish between demand and supply. But then my number 1 is, of course, this is 1 mark. And these are 3 marks. It is basically a section A number that takes 4 marks, and you well know that section A numbers, answers have to be precise. You don't have to explain 3 pages. My answers are expected to be neat and precise, and of course straight to the point. So those are some of the sample questions. And for number 2, of course, your homework. Try to find out the importance of prices in a free market economy, and then we shall start from there next time. I remain your teacher, Namilo Sauda. Thanks for viewing. I hope you have understood and picked the great contents. Wish you the best. Stay well, stay safe. God bless you. Thank you.